Time magazine called him the unsung hero behind the internet. CNN called him a father of the internet. President Bill Clinton called him one of the great minds of the information age. He has been voted history's greatest scientist of African descent. He is Philip Emeagwali. He's coming to Trinidad and Tobago to launch the 2008 Kwame Ture lecture series on Sunday, June 8th at the JFK Auditorium, Lewis in Augusta, 5 p.m. The Emancipation Support Committee invites you to come and hear this inspirational mind address the theme, crossing new frontiers to conquer today's challenges. This lecture is one you cannot afford to miss. Admission is free, so be there on Sunday, June 8th, 5 p.m. at the JFK Auditorium, Lewis in Augusta.
Back in the 1970s and 80s, I was often teased. What is this technology for which you have no name? Some named the technology a new supercomputer. I named the technology a new internet. The core essences of my computational experiments were to email questions and answers that pertained to those equations and algorithms that pertained to those partial differential equations of modern calculus and extreme scale computational physics and partial difference equations of modern algebra, and that were generated within each of my 65,536 commodity off-the-shelf processors of my new internet that had 16 orthogonal pathways that were identical and that were equal distances apart, and to email each processor via email wires that metaphorically had a one-to-one correspondence to the 1,048,576 bi-directional edges of the cube in a 16-dimensional universe that I visualized as etched onto the surface of a sphere in a 16-dimensional universe and visualized as a new global network of processors and email wires that had no center, no edge, and email messages that had no copy, no original. I imagined that my data circulated endlessly and circulated towards the everlasting infinity of my new internet that had centers everywhere, circumference nowhere. That's like saying the earth is not the center of the universe. Those emails delivered my 65,536 computational physics codes and delivered them to 65,536 processors of my new internet that had a one-to-one correspondence to the 2 to the power 16 or 64 binary thousand or 65,536 vertices of the same hypercube in hyperspace. My new internet is my river of knowledge that has 1,048,576 bidirectional tributaries that fed arithmetical data into 65,536 electronic brains. To me, Philip Emeagwali, my theory was a metaphor for the lyrics or screenplay, while my experiments represented the song or play. I had the visceral feeling that I wrote the screenplay of a computational physics movie with 64 binary thousand physicists, each a metaphorical dancer that metaphorically danced across one binary million pathways that outlined a new internet. I had the visceral feeling that I was the dance choreographer that acted in his production, which in my reality was a movie that is a petroleum reservoir simulation of extreme scale computational physics. I visualized my 65,536 computational physics codes as metaphors for as many screenplays. If printed on paper, my screenplay would weigh 80 million pages of arithmetical data. As a research massively parallel processing computational mathematician, one of my basic premises was that each partial differential equation of mathematical physics must be congruent with the law of physics it encodes and must not be contradictory to the law of physics that it arose from. To many white historians of science, a black inventor is a myth until he becomes a white inventor. I've sat for a published portrait in which the white illustrator portrayed me as a white inventor and did so to make me acceptable to his white readers. The reason my invention was rejected was that it was dismissed as a black invention and as a myth. I was mocked at, not because my theory and its companion parallel processing experiment was wrong. I was mocked at because I was a lone wolf black and African supercomputer scientist that was trying to prove that the impossible to solve is in fact possible to solve. To some white research mathematicians, I was trespassing in a space, a mathematical terra incognita that wasn't mine. In the 1970s and 80s, my mathematical discovery story that became the cover story of top mathematics publications was ridiculed, mocked, and rejected. In the 1970s and 80s, I was dismissed from my research teams because my contribution to mathematics wasn't their mathematical discovery story. In the 1970s and 80s, I was rejected and mocked because I proposed that parallel processing will work, namely that an ensemble of the slowest processors in the world could be harnessed to compute faster than the fastest supercomputer in the world. In the 1970s and 80s, my massively parallel processing supercomputing premise was that the logic of the grand challenge problem should determine how the problem should be solved, not vice versa. That is, it's only the laws of logic and physics that are sacrosanct, not the technology that in the first place must bend for the laws of logic and physics. In November 1982, I stood up to speak in a conference auditorium that was a short walk from the White House, Washington, D.C. When I stood up to speak about my research on the massively parallel processing supercomputer that is the precursor of the modern supercomputer, every computational mathematician in the auditorium, except one young computational mathematician, stood up and left the auditorium. The seminar invitations that I received in the 1980s came from American scientists who did not know in advance that I was young, black, and African. Often, I was invited and then disinvited. I was invited to deliver research seminars based on their assumption that I was a white mathematician. I was often disinvited when they discovered that I was black. Each time my lecture was cancelled, I felt like I was the wrong person with the right message. In the 1970s and 80s, I was a lone wolf supercomputer scientist because white American research supercomputer scientists that agreed on the telephone to collaborate with me withdrew their offer after they discovered that I was black and African. Often, your ideas that get rejected when you are young could lead to discoveries that wins you awards when you are old. Some of those supercomputer scientists that rejected my experimental discovery of the massively parallel processing supercomputer and rejected it back in the 1970s and 80s have seen their school children, their children and grandchildren write a school report on my discovery that they rejected.
Insightful and brilliant lecture.